Welcome back to GHRTV. 12th of February marked the International Day Against the Use of Child Soldiers. As such, this week's Human Rights News Update looks at the conflict in South Sudan and the alarming human rights violations it has led to, including the use of children as soldiers. The conflict in South Sudan, which began in 2013, is a complex and multifaceted crisis rooted in political, ethnic, and economic factors. The struggle for power and resources has led to widespread human rights abuses, creating a humanitarian catastrophe in the world's youngest nation. At its core, the conflict can be traced back to a power struggle between President Salva Kiir and his former Vice President Riek Machar. This political rivalry quickly escalated into an ethnic conflict, with Kiir belonging to the Dinka ethnic group and Machar to the Nuer. The power struggle exacerbated long-standing tensions between these two major ethnic communities, leading to violent clashes and the displacement of civilians. Human rights abuses in South Sudan have been pervasive throughout the conflict. Both government and opposition forces have been implicated in atrocities, including extrajudicial killings, sexual violence, forced displacement, and the recruitment of child soldiers. Civilians, especially from marginalized ethnic groups, have borne the brunt of these violations, facing widespread atrocities that amount to crimes against humanity. One of the most alarming aspects of the conflict is the deliberate targeting of civilians based on their ethnicity. This has resulted in massacres, widespread displacement, and a significant humanitarian crisis. The targeting of civilians along ethnic lines is a blatant violation of international human rights law, specifically the right to life and the prohibition of discrimination. Sexual violence has also been used as a weapon of war, with both government and opposition forces implicated in the rape and sexual assault of women and girls. The widespread nature of these crimes highlight the urgent need for accountability and justice in addressing the human rights violations in South Sudan. Additionally, forced displacement has been a hallmark of the conflict, with millions of South Sudanese civilians fleeing their homes to escape violence. Many have sought refuge in neighboring countries, leading to a regional humanitarian and refugee crisis. The right to freedom of movement and the right to seek asylum are fundamental human rights that have been systematically violated in the context of the South Sudan conflict. Furthermore, the recruitment and use of child soldiers by both government and opposition forces have further compounded the human rights crisis. Children, often forcibly conscripted, are exposed to violence, psychological trauma, and the loss of their fundamental rights to education and protection. The international community has condemned the use of child soldiers, emphasizing the need for accountability and the rehabilitation of affected children. The South Sudan People's Defense Forces reiterated its commitment to end the recruitment of children in the National Army on the 12th of February, which marks the International Day Against the Use of Child Soldiers, or Red Hand Day. The humanitarian situation in South Sudan is dire, with millions of people in need of assistance. The conflict has disrupted access to basic services, including healthcare and education, further jeopardizing the well-being of the civilian population. The denial of access to humanitarian aid and the deliberate targeting of aid workers by armed groups represent additional violations of human rights and international humanitarian law. In conclusion, the conflict in South Sudan is characterized by a complex interplay of political, ethnic, and economic factors, resulting in widespread human rights abuses. The deliberate targeting of civilians, sexual violence, forced displacement, and the recruitment of child soldiers constitute severe violations of international human rights law. Addressing the crisis requires a comprehensive approach that includes accountability, justice, and efforts to promote reconciliation and sustainable peace in the region. As such, recognizing the International Day Against the Use of Child Soldiers serves as an important step to raise awareness on the multiple human rights violations that occur in South Sudan. Thank you for tuning in to this week's Human Rights News Update. For further human rights information and reporting, please follow us on social media or visit our website, ghrtv.org.